Thank you. And thanks for DQ for inviting me to come speak. I'm here to talk about Adobe's transformation with regard to how we think about and handle accessibility. But first, I wanted to share a little bit about Adobe's tools. Since to many people, Adobe means something very specific, like Adobe Acrobat for PDF documents or Photoshop. We've got a huge collection of products, services, and solutions, but we think about these in two main areas: digital media and digital experience. Digital media includes our Creative Cloud and Document Cloud businesses, and digital experience is the Adobe Experience Cloud area. We have a ton of products that many people are just not even aware of. In the Creative Cloud space, we've got products like Premiere Pro, After Effects, InDesign, and Lightroom that are more well known to some users. Document Cloud, we've got Adobe Sign, Adobe Scan, Adobe Acrobat. And then on the Experience Cloud side, we have products like Adobe Target, Audience Manager, Marketo, Engage, and Analytics, and many more than the ones that I've mentioned. In addition to the number of products we have, many of these products have mobile versions on Android, on iOS, web versions, desktop versions. And so addressing accessibility across this entire product lineup is a huge task that really requires strategic planning. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what we've done for that. Before I do, though, it's also worthwhile sharing a little bit about Adobe's strategy and how it's viewing its tools. We're really focused on, so you'll hear Adobe people talking about unleashing creativity, accelerating document productivity, and powering digital businesses. And these are key interests for our customers. And this is for anyone who wants to express an idea, students, artists, graphic designers, marketers, data scientists. We work with huge corporations, government agencies, and educational institutions from the very large to the very small. The accessibility team, my accessibility team at Adobe, is not the only set of people at Adobe that work on accessibility, but I view us as the center of a hub and spoke model. We work with product management and engineering to help guide accessibility efforts. We work on standards. I've been involved with the development of WCAG since 2006 and was chair of the group for 7 years, ending in 2020. And James Nerthen on my team co-chairs the ARIA working group. We also work on accessibility in UI component libraries, building training for Adobe employees, and supporting product teams implementing accessibility requirements during product design and development. I'm going to talk about a lot of the things that we do at Adobe. A lot of this has to do with my group, but there's another very important group at Adobe that we work with closely, which is the design organization. If you didn't attend Matt May's presentation earlier today, I encourage you to watch the recording when it comes out, because Matt is driving incredibly important work to integrate accessibility and inclusive design broadly across the Adobe design organization and across Adobe. And this is really a key part of our overall plan. Thinking about the current environment that we operate in for accessibility, there's pressures that we feel related to accessibility. Legal risk is where many companies start, and it is worth paying attention to, absolutely. I also list compliance and revenue together, because today most of the push for compliance that we see comes from either specific markets, such as the public sector, or specific deals with customers. It is convenient to think about compliance because people tend to think that there's an end to compliance work. When we talk with development teams, they talk about doing a push to become compliant. And what we really want to focus on is users and making sure that our products are addressing their needs. So accessibility is a journey. Compliance provides a useful set of requirements to help us make progress toward that, toward support for users, but we just don't want to make it the only focus. Due to COVID, digital transformation has accelerated tremendously in the past year. Many of our customers are part of this. And while accessibility was already important with the vast majority of people working remotely, the safety net of having someone in a physical location to help support customers or employees is effectively gone, which removes an often heard justification for delaying accessibility work. Our latest strategy was put into place prior to the pandemic by a year, but it's still a path that we're on. And in fact, our journey will only end when we stop inventing new products and new user experiences that we need to make sure are accessible. Our products have many competing demands: privacy, security, accessibility, other feature development. We have many people working on products. Across companies have seen products shipped with accessibility issues or a significant lack of accessibility support. We've seen code errors that have revealed lack of attention to accessibility and a lack of testing. And we've seen great progress as well. And I'm speaking for me at Adobe, but I think this is true for companies and people working on accessibility across the board. So we've seen great progress, but the competing demands on products has in the past made the accessibility changes behave in a punctuated equilibrium, with periods of little change accented by spurts of greater improvements. Part of our transformation is to normalize the idea that with any UI work comes accessibility work, and that work on accessibility is directly related to the associated changes in the UI for a product. Part of how we're achieving this is simply getting accessibility to be viewed as a higher priority than it often is. There's a few things that we know, right? Accessibility doesn't happen by accident, at least not consistently. Sometimes you get a nice surprise. You have to involve design and engineering diligence in order to make sure that the quality is there, that there's testing, that there's planning for accessibility. And all of this requires maturity within the organization. So how did we get there? How are we getting there? Partnering with security is our current path right now. So when I say that accessibility is in the security organization, people tend to think that there either isn't really a good reason, it was just done out of convenience, or that it's all about compliance. And the reason that accessibility is in security at Adobe is because our chief technology officer recognized that the security organization had built a program that enabled better and more regular engagement with product teams and established reporting and communication channels to help raise visibility to executives and in turn to promote improvements in the products. Security has a number of compliance standards, more than accessibility: PCI, SOC 2, and many more. One great advantage that accessibility has is that years of engagement with accessibility standards bodies has created a standards environment that is substantially more harmonized than it is for security. So how did we adapt the security program for accessibility? So we have a program called CCF, which is the Common Controls Framework. It was built for security to try and make sense of the very diverse collection of security requirements. They had thousands of individual security requirements that were contained in dozens of different security standards that they needed to conform to. So CCF was designed to combine all these into one set and to make it so that it was more easily understood what needed to be done as far as conforming to security. For accessibility, we have integrated a set of governance criteria as well as compliance criteria, which we base on WCAG 2.1 AA, into CCF. So our CCF accessibility version of CCF to support accessibility is using 2.1 AA as the standard. The governance criteria include additional items, some of which are simple, like each team needing to identify and train an accessibility champion, as well as more complex items related to specifying an accessibility roadmap. We obviously need to make sure that we're staffing to support this. We have program and product managers engaging with teams to help enable their work on accessibility and to help track progress, which we regularly report to executives so that they have that type of visibility. Being able to build on Security's established program simplifies the rollout and adoption of CCF accessibility and helps the execs know where the products are at and to use that information to guide decisions. I've found over time that I and many people who work on accessibility at Adobe and otherwise sometimes have a hard time believing that upper management, the executives, aren't aware of the issues in the products. We work on accessibility so much that it is totally obvious to us that, you know, when a product comes out and you can't operate it with the keyboard, or where there's substantial color contrast issues, or many other types of issues, and the executives aren't going to necessarily know that. So if we don't tell them, or if our customers don't tell them, they probably don't know. So this strategy is critically important because it helps raise the visibility of what we're doing in our products to the people who are in the position of making decisions. One indication that I take of the power of this is that when Adobe joined the Valuable 500 in January of this past year, our CEO agreed that this would be something that Adobe could participate in, but he did point out that if we didn't have the ability to evaluate metrics on accessibility, that we would not be joining. So it's really critically important for these decision makers to have access to this type of information. Engaging with product teams, there's lots of different models that can be used for this. The thing that I really want to point out on this slide, I probably should have made it the title of the slide, is that the product teams are doing the work. It's not that the accessibility team's not involved. We have engineers who are involved in helping build UI frameworks. We have engineers who are providing technical consultation for product teams to help them understand how to implement accessibility. My product managers are providing assistance with requirements, helping teams learn how to review designs for accessibility, and we're establishing practices, sometimes in conjunction with other groups like design, for example, to clarify what the communication needs to be between design and engineering. Jack Nicolai on my team has spoken in detail about what we call blue lining, which is helping the designers understand how they need to communicate information specific to accessibility with engineers to help increase the chances of success when the engineers are doing their implementation work. My team also creates training and resources to help teams address accessibility well and support accessibility engineering tool acquisition or development to ease implementation. And we also can work with our teams to arrange user testing to confirm successes, or really to try and help address any problem that they may be finding as a stumbling block for accessibility. In the past, teams would deal with a spike of accessibility work and then move on to regular work, developing a product. Teams that engage in the work directly by people on the team, rather than farming it out to a vendor or bringing in a resource who's just a temporary team member to fix accessibility issues, they tend to become more invested in accessibility. They tend to understand it more. They tend to develop greater understanding, and great things happen. If you don't do this, though, and I'm going to provide a counterexample, then you can waste a lot of effort. Years ago, we did work on Adobe.com. There was a mega menu that was on Adobe.com, and it was huge. There was all sorts of content in the drop downs in this menu, and so one of my engineers set out to proving to the web team that this could be made accessible, and did a lot of work. We engaged with some outside technical consultants for specific questions related to the ARIA implementation. There was some things that we had to learn as part of the process, and ultimately we not only fixed the menu, but convinced the web team to push it out and to make this keyboard accessible menu part of the regular Adobe.com experience. And that was a great victory. But the team implementing it, or the team pushing it live, the web team, hadn't been involved in the work. And so about a month later, when it was replaced with the new menu, all that work was put to the side. That work actually is still available. There's a Adobe Mega Menu GitHub repository, so you can go look at that and see the example and fork it and implement it yourself if you'd like. And a number of people have done that. So it's all was not lost, but in terms of getting the teams to focus on accessibility and keeping their attention on it and making it result in shipping code, it wasn't the best overall experience. I want to talk a little bit about some different work that product teams have done. So in this case, this is with Acrobat, and it's with what we call liquid mode. Hopefully, many of you have found liquid mode or have seen some of the announcements. At the end of this deck, there's a link to the blog post where we talked about this. But one of the problems that people have had for quite a while, particularly on mobile devices, is when you get a PDF document and it's just too small to see. And this slide is divided up with 4 screenshots. So on the far left is a screenshot of a PDF document that shows up. This document actually looked not as good as it does here. I probably should have included a screenshot before, but this is with liquid mode turned on. And what happens with liquid mode is that it extracts the content of that document from the tags and represents the content in the mobile view so that all the text wraps, all the text is linear vertically so that there's no scrolling left and right. This same document shown as a PDF document without liquid mode, you would have to, if you wanted to zoom in, you'd then be scrolling left and right. And it just makes for a poor user experience and makes it harder for people to access that content. Some of what else we get from liquid mode, in addition to enabling users who have trouble zooming in on their mobile devices, whether that's an iPad or an Android phone, is we also get the ability to collapse sections. So the little arrows, little carrots upside down or right side up, carrots in the view are to collapse sections. So you can see in the second section here that there's the warning section has been collapsed. So you don't need to read the whole document at once. You have PDF documents that are dozens of pages, hundreds of pages, and this will greatly simplify your being able to read and interpret that content. Going even beyond that, there's also an outline view so that we know for screen reader users accessing web content, being able to read a page by headings to access content is a very powerful navigational tool for end users. And this is something that we've brought with Liquid Mode, not only to support screen reader users, but to support all users, someone who wants to have a simpler version of the document so that they're just looking at the outline view to get a high level idea of what's in the document. It's a very powerful tool for a variety of different user situations. And then finally, over to the right, one of the other benefits of the work that we've done with Liquid Mode is that there's additional reading settings, so that when you're in Liquid Mode, you can change the font size and bump that up. And you can see that this font size has been bumped up to 200% here. There's also the ability to change character spacing, and there's the ability to change line spacing. So some of these things that are requirements under WCAG 2.1 are included here within Liquid Mode for PDF documents. So this is a great example of the Acrobat team really owning and carrying forward accessibility. We have Rob Haverty on my team works with them in an advisory capacity, but the Acrobat team has been doing work on accessibility since 2001, and they've really done a lot of work to solve user problems, both for all users who no one likes to zoom in on a phone and try and read the document, but also making sure that it works well for screen reader users, that it's also providing benefits for users who want different text settings, etc. So that's the sort of thing that can happen when teams become more invested. And next, another story that I want to talk about a little bit is Adobe Connect. So Adobe Connect is a product for doing webinars, and it has been for many years a Flash-based product. As many of you know, Adobe Flash is no longer supported as of the beginning of this year. So it's critical that Connect not use Flash. And so it was rebuilt by the team with an HTML-based UI, making sure that they're focusing on using accessible components, that they're paying attention to keyboard requirements, and making it work in a web browser. They also, in addition to that major overhaul, have also provided major improvements to closed captioning in Connect. And in some cases, it's the details that really make the difference here. With Connect closed captioning in the Flash-based interface, we've had closed captioning since about 2005. And one of the big limitations that we've dealt with for a long time was that the way that the technology was built meant that if someone went full screen in Connect to show the shared screen, that was all you could see. So you wouldn't be able to see the closed captions. So someone who is relying on captions would have to not use full screen for a different set for an individual pod in order to make sure they could see the captions. That is one of the areas that has been improved on with this new release as well, so that the captions are a full-fledged citizen within the content in Connect, so that you get capabilities that are much like you get with digital television today. You can move the caption area wherever you want. You can change the size. You can change the colors. You can adjust the text size. So there's all different controls around the captions in Connect that are going to be very powerful for people who are using Connect for webinars. Matt mentioned earlier about Premiere Pro, and since I'm talking about captioning, I'll mention this as well as another example, which is that Premiere Pro just yesterday released an updated workflow for captioning. And Premiere has done captioning work for a number of years, but they listen to our customers in terms of how their workflows were proceeding for closed captioning, and they made improvements. to that workflow, so that you can easily add captions, edit captions, view the captions within Premiere. And this is going to be further improved as we add in improved speech to text support as part of that caption workflow. So much like with YouTube, you can upload a video and it can be captioned by speech recognition. Premiere will have that capability as well, but the advantage is that you'll then be able to, in Premiere, you'll be able to take that starting point and edit those into crisp, clean, effective captions for end users to view. Experience Platform is probably one of the products that most people haven't heard of. This is within our digital experience area, and it's the foundation of the Experience Cloud. And part of what we're doing with Experience Cloud is taking a lot of the solutions and services that we have, and then also even extending on top of those, allowing our partners to extend on top of those, and build apps that through APIs access key Adobe functionality in their applications. But to do so, you need to have access to Experience Platform. This application that we have, it's a web-based application, and the changes that needed to be made were actually not that groundbreaking, right? This is not brand new technology. There's a lot of work to be done. The value of this story is really about the team and their uptake of accessibility. This is the sort of situation where if we were focusing on accessibility by sending out an accessibility engineer to work with a team and go fix things, then we would be in this that punctuated equilibrium state where there'd be a bunch of work that was done to fix the product, and then a long period where nothing happened, or worse, as the product is improved and worked on and new features are added, accessibility might not be taken into account. But in this case, engineers on the team who were working on this became aware of accessibility, became interested in accessibility, understood the impact that it can have, and did a lot of work to not only fix the product, but also to adjust the process and to make the major changes to the UI and to how the team works at rolling out new features. Dylan Cario, who is one of the engineers that was very involved with this, he and Elle Waters are speaking about this next. So I won't go into any more depth on this because they're gonna talk about this much more. All right. So React Spectrum. Matt talked a little bit about React Spectrum. Spectrum is Adobe's design system for all of our products, and it includes not only the look and feel of the UI that is Adobe's UI, but also includes information for people who are implementing using with Spectrum related to keyboard behaviors, related to high contrast mode, and so there's a lot of information that's contained within that. And my team has worked with the Spectrum team to help make sure that that we are addressing accessibility as well as possible in there. React Spectrum is Adobe's web-based implementation for Spectrum. And in this case, this is one where my team, my engineers worked with the React Spectrum engineers to help make sure that we're clarifying, requirements, that we're helping define the specs, that we're helping address any issues, any questions that come up, so that the engineering teams can do the accessibility work themselves and be successful in doing so. React Spectrum itself is just one of our UI frameworks that we use. There's also Spectrum Web Components that is another relatively new component library that's being used across Adobe. But these tools are critically important for our accessibility efforts because there is always a shortage of resources to address any topic, not just accessibility, but any new feature. It's very common that an engineering team wants more resources than they ultimately get, and they still do amazing things. And from an accessibility perspective, we have that challenge as well. So we invest heavily in UI libraries like React Spectrum, like Spectrum Web Components, so that when our teams are creating an application using React Spectrum, that they're getting a lot of accessibility work without as much effort on their part. And we've seen this with different applications, number of web applications, but then also even we have products like for the Creative Cloud, we've got the Creative Cloud desktop app, which is a desktop app that uses web technology inside of a native application wrapper, and it uses React Spectrum. And so we're able to deliver accessibility in a way that required much less effort than many of the desktop app efforts in the past have. React Spectrum is, all of these, Spectrum and React Spectrum are open source, so we've shared these with the world. And as I was mentioning before, how our partners can build applications on top of the Experience platform, React Spectrum is what our partners would typically be using, and they would have these highly accessible building blocks so that when they build an app that is put into the Experience platform, that there's accessibility that is that's built into that. One of the things that I definitely want to highlight here, particularly if you use React and you've got a design system, React Aria, which is part of the open source React Spectrum offering, doesn't have to be used specific to Adobe, right? There's a version, React Aria can be combined using React hooks with your design system and your components, so that React Aria doesn't have any visual presentation aspects that you need to worry about. You'd be responsible for that in your design system, but in terms of the accessibility implementation, you get you get all the work that we've done with React Spectrum for free as part of the React Aria work. Looking ahead, so we've done this work within Adobe. We've got CCF for our organizational structure, and we have the dashboards to communicate up, so there's much higher visibility for accessibility than there has been in the past. There's still a lot of work to do with product teams. We've got a lot of products. They're not all 100% accessible. Some of them have much more work to do than others. But we will continue down this road. We are, looking at the set of governance criteria that we have, and we will be evolving those. And we're going to be evolving as the standards that we need to conform with change, right? Right now, we're waiting to see what happens with the Government of Canada and standards for accessibility. So, there may be a need to add compliance items within our CCF framework, as well as updating governance requirements for teams. We're going to continue to refine the engagements that we have with our executives, because it is an ongoing process. The education and the reaching out, working with the teams, and of course executives come and go as well. So we have to continually be a presence to make sure that we can continue to advocate for accessibility and to advocate for it as something that needs to be a core part of what our products do and what Adobe believes in, rather than something that a centralized team can go out and handle for Adobe. On top of that, Adobe does have some additional initiatives. We've got inclusive hiring initiatives. We are going to be expanding our work around vendor accessibility requirements. So if you are a vendor who works with Adobe at some point in the near future, we will be changing and improving on how we work with you for accessibility requirements for the products that you build, that we use. And we've been seeing this as well from the customers that we sell to, where they're more and more interested in accessibility and gives us greater visibility into their requirements. We've also been expanding our employee network, which is a great source that's not led through my team. My team participates in it to help build the number of people within Adobe that are speaking to accessibility as an important requirement and speaking to the impact that it has on them, on their families. And so the employee network is not really directly part of our development strategy, but it is part of our development strategy because it's definitely it's an important voice that is heard around the company. And better tools, standardizing our approaches. We have a job that's open right now for an additional PM. The focus is to help us build up and scale our resources, because we have so many teams and we have a small group of PMs, and we need to build more and better resources, expanding our training, expanding documentation around accessibility. So all of these things are critically important. And actually, as we've found more success with our current strategy for teams having greater visibility around how accessible their product is or isn't, it's really increased the pressure on us to have additional resources and to have additional time and people to help support all those teams. Because if they come at you all at once, there's a lot of them, and it really takes a lot of planning and organization to be ready for that. So that's a continual effort. So I'm going to stop there so we can have a little bit of time for questions. I did say that there was some resources that are in the slides. So some of the things that I've spoken about, blog posts, React Spectrum, React Aria, that's all available in the deck. And thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Andrew. That was a great session. We have a lot of questions coming through. By the way, these slides will be available, and those resources Andrew just shared on the last slide will also be available to everyone who participated or registered. So I'm going to get started on a couple of these questions. The most popular one is, does Adobe Accessibility Team work with developer teams from third-party products that save to PDF to allow them to make accessible PDFs?
Do we work with third-party products? Yes, we do. However, it is more. There's a couple of ways that I would like to highlight. I mean, one is we have the actual Adobe libraries that are available for products for developers to be able to integrate, and there's licensing costs associated with that. We have a web-based version of it, of reader technology as well. So these things are, technologies that, it's possible for those to be utilized by an outside developer. The other way is through the standards process. We've done, by releasing PDF as an open source standard, by investing in PDF UA as an open source standard to help specify accessibility in PDF and what needs to be done. We of course haven't done all the work within PDF UA because it was an open source standard during the development process, but these resources are available for outside, for non-Adobe development teams to be able to use and to build to.
Awesome. I have a question from Robin. Hi, Andrew. You've talked about compliance and product engagement quite a bit, which are obviously key aspects of the challenge. But in terms of culture, what did you do to push accessibility?
So it's been a long haul. Working on accessibility. I mean, I think there's a variety of different things that have been done, from the culture side. We've got our trainings, which are available not only for engineers, but we've got a, general accessibility awareness training. We've got our training has accessibility white belt and blue belt. The blue belt is more engineering focused. The white belt is more it's deeper level than the general awareness training, but it's more focused around product teams. I think a lot of the work that, Matt has been doing with the design organization has really helped with that, and on the design side. And Adobe in general has also been really focusing on, inclusion as part of its message internally, right? And that is broader than just accessibility, of course. I mean, it's talking about gender, it's talking about race, it's talking about disability, and there has, by combining accessibility in with those messages, I think it's really helped to raise people's awareness around the gaps that we have and what we've done and what still needs to be done.
Awesome. Andrew, can you speak more about accessibility reporting? What do you measure and how do you balance tracking issues versus outcomes?
So we, for individual products, I mean, we're tracking against all of the criteria that we have within CCF. And some of those, as I mentioned, are governance criteria. Some of those are compliance criteria. And so, we do with our products, products need to, some of the governance criteria that we have are, they need to make sure that we have a champion. The champion has to be, trained on accessibility. We have to, the products have to have, an audit. They have to have, establish, the testing procedures. There's a number of different topics, all the way up to, having roadmaps. So when we report out on where the products are at, the view does it tends to be more aggregate. The easiest thing to measure is compliance, of course. So a lot of what is measured accrues back to compliance. But there's also tremendous benefit in being able to do so, because it opens up the ability for teams to engage in user testing, to be able to engage in further improvements to the products. And I will say also that we're not just looking at the accessibility of the product UI, but also what is possible to create from that product. So if you're looking at Adobe Acrobat, There's the accessibility of the user interface. So a keyboard user who wants to use Acrobat, or a screen magnifier user who wants to use Acrobat. There's work associated with that goes on, but then also ensuring that the tools are available and the processes are available within Acrobat so that you can create accessible PDF documents. And both of these things, I should say too, that Adobe, in our conformance reports, so the ACR's accessibility conformance reports, those are all published on the Adobe public website, so that you really can go and take a look and see, what are the issues, what are the strengths of all the different applications that we have on both of those fronts, both the authored content as well as the application UI.
So there is a question in here that actually connects to that one. So why did Adobe decide to publish their VPAT? Has there been any downsides for publicly declaring things that do not support for some categories?
We decided to many years ago because it's not going to be any real secret, I guess, right? We want to support our customers, and we want to support our customers with accessibility. And I think that the first thing that we can do with that is to be honest and to, convey clearly what our products do or don't support. Within the government, they, have to have a VPAT or an ACR now for many procurements. And the VPAT template, the first word of it is voluntary. So, potentially, if you had a product that the government wanted to purchase, you could say, well, you should test it and find out how accessible it is. And, few companies take that step and say, well, we're not voluntarily providing it. It's a condition of sales in many cases. So we're going to provide it. We're going to have it. And Adobe's big enough with enough customers that every product we have, we get requests for the ACR. So we share it. Has there been any downsides to that? I don't believe so. One downside, I guess, some companies will say, if you want one, then you need to ask for it, and then we'll send it. And so, maybe there'd be some value in being able to say, oh, we know which customers exactly are interested in accessibility, and we have that data. For us, when we didn't have them published, we would get so many requests that we could quickly lose track of that, and it wound up being more work. So we just post them live.
We might have time for just one last question. So is the accessibility team a centralized team, and how do they work with the other teams?
Accessibility team is a centralized team. So we're part of the security organization. Security is a centralized team. And we are not the team that goes out and fixes accessibility. We are the team that helps communicates to the product teams what they need to think about with regard to accessibility, what the organizational expectations are related to accessibility. And we will, in addition to providing some amount of engineering support and product management support, short of doing it for the teams, we will provide that support and then report out on it. And so, we partner with the different teams. The PMs on my team all have different teams that they work with, product teams that they work with closely. And so we have a relationship where we're, supporting them, but not doing it for them.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Andrew, for this awesome session. And thank you for everyone else who's joined us. Please enjoy the rest of AxCon. Bye.